Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Good morning, friends. Ruth Ann Zimmerman here from the garden for Homesteading with the Zimmermans. And today is the first of what hopefully will be many 2024 garden tours. It is shortly after 6 a.m. It is not quite 70 degrees, and in today's video, I'm just going to be walking through the garden, showing you what's growing, what's struggling, and also sharing with you all of our favorite garden tools, if I can find them. I have a habit of taking my favorite tools from this garden to that garden to the flower garden and laying them down and forgetting where I put them. I am slightly ADHD when it comes to gardening because I just go from here to there in a very unorganized manner when I work in the garden. It is my habit to come to the garden almost every weekday morning as the sun comes up. And this is when I do a little bit of weeding, because remember, if you were here for the 2022 garden season, I've got all of those videos in a playlist for you, and I will add these to that playlist. I did a lot of teaching about the garden, but here's what one of the reasons that I come to the garden so early in the morning is because weeds pull easier in the morning than they do at night or during the hot part of the day. There's something about the moisture of the dew and the weeds stretching up for getting to the daylight that I'm sure there's a more scientific way to say this, but weeds pull much easier in the morning. The other time or reason I started the habit of coming to the garden in the morning is for 20 plus years I had babies and toddlers, and there was seasons when they would sleep till about 7 a.m. Now I had some very early risers too. And so getting up at 6 a.m. gave me a whole hour to work peacefully in the garden without babies and toddlers to care for. And I do think those early mornings is where the love of gardening just settled deep down in my soul. And sometimes now, when I accidentally sleep in past 6, I'll open my eyes and I'm like, oh no, the sun is shining. I have to get to the garden. I just don't want to miss out on any morning gardening time. So today I'm spending my morning gardening time with you guys, and I'm so thankful you're all here. I love to take you to my garden. And I know I've said this before, but in the Amish and Mennonite communities, when you go visit someone, the ladies will almost always take a walk to the garden. And in last week's video, I talked a little bit about what I miss, from the Mennonite community since we left. And that is one of them. My sisters will, when they come, they'll say, hey, can we go walk to your garden? But like my aunts, my mom and my aunts, every time they would get together, you would just see them go to the garden. And I remember as a little girl, I would just tag along, weaving through their legs, waiting till they go to the house to make lunch or get us a snack. And it seemed that they spend hours walking through the gardens and talking about the different plants. So that's how I was raised in the Mennonite community, with that kind of gardening culture. So this is like me taking you, my YouTube community, for a walk in the garden with me. So first, we are going to take a look at the garlic. This garlic I planted last fall and put a little compost on it, and it is so tall. So I have not seen any scapes yet. Oh, I do see one right here. I was just about to say it's about time for me to see some scapes. But yeah, I'm seeing them now. So these are some of the first scapes. I'm going to let them go a while yet because they're just beginning to grow. But this is the... Oh, I got this garlic a couple years ago. It's Music is the variety of garlic. I have to plant a more hardy garlic here because of our harsh winters. But yeah, I have been the last couple days, I've been thinking, I'm surprised that I don't see any garlic scapes yet. When these scapes get bigger and more curly, I will harvest them, and I'll either chop them up with some olive oil and freeze them in ice cube trays, or we'll dry them, chop them up and dry them and grind them up to use in our winter cooking like garlic powder. And here we've got our red raspberries. Now these are an ever-bearing red raspberry, and more of a bush type, not so many canes. And I can see that these are pushing some buds for their spring crop, which means I should fill the dehydrator with a whole bunch of red raspberry leaves so that we can have raspberry tea this winter. For the best red raspberry tea, you want to collect leaves before your raspberries go to blossom. So when I collect to make raspberry tea, I'll collect all the new and tender leaves. So I'll be getting a bunch of these, like the newer leaves. I don't really want to get these old ones down here. You'll want the tender new ones. So next I've got some sweet onions in here next to the garlic. And these are my yellow keeping onions. These are the onions that I'll keep for winter. And then over here right there are the spring onions. All the way along there are the spring onions that we've been eating with our salads. And then I've got some kale coming over there. And if you've been here for a couple years or on my Instagram, you know that my family's not real crazy over kale, and that I mostly plant it and feed it to my cows because they love it. So that's why I only have 4 plants of kale. We do eat some of it, but we're not super crazy over it. Next, we've got all the potatoes, and this first row here is the early red potatoes that I planted very early in the season for fresh eating. And then these are all Kennebec. I think I may have 1 row of Yukon Golds, but the rest of them are all Kennebecs, and those will be my keeping potatoes. Now we've hilled them, and if the weather would hold, I would use my tiller and till between the rows and hill them again. But the boys have been doing a great job keeping the potato beetles off of them. I pay the boys 1 penny for each bug that they find and 2 pennies for each egg that they find. And they have been doing a great job. And I wanted to show you, I just noticed that my early red potatoes are pushing blossoms, which means it won't be long until we can dig under these and find some baby red potatoes, because baby red potatoes are my absolute favorite potatoes ever. So next I'm going to show you my peas. And the peas with some volunteer sunflowers. I planted my peas so early. We had a very early spring, and because peas are a cold crop and they love to be planted early, they love to be cold, I was really expecting a lot from my peas. However, this is what happened. So here's what I believe happened with the peas. Here's what I know happened. Something ate them off. My peas should be to the top of this fence right now. They're blooming, and normally they're to the top of the fence, tipping the fence over when they begin to bloom. But what happened is, for most of the month of May, something was nibbling them off. And because I planted them all the way down here at the bottom end of my garden from the house, I didn't really notice it. And we had cool weather, so I was kind of like, oh yeah, they're probably just being pokey. But when I saw somebody else's peas in their garden, I'm like, oh, something's really eating off my peas. So we hung these, so I had to visit with my mom. And I said, normally if something's eating something, one of my crops in the garden, I just put some dog hair or human hair along the row, and that deters them. And she said, yeah, that works if it's rabbits, but you could have sparrows eating your peas or birds eating your peas, because all the tender new leaves were always gone. And so we hung these tin pie plates, just like Grandma used to. And my mom reminded me of that. She was like, remember, we hang the pie plates, and they, are shiny and they keep the birds away. So, and the other thing that I learned is when it rains, it reduces the effectiveness of the dog hair and human hair that you put on your garden. And we had so much rain in May that when I would put dog hair out, and I would assume that it was going to last for the next couple weeks, it probably just deterred any rabbits for the next couple days. So it was too late. By the time I accepted the fact that I'm not going to get a nice big harvest of peas, it was too late to tear them out and start over, because peas are a cold weather crop and they really, really like cold weather. So I decided that we might get enough for fresh eating, and that's okay. And I will try again to plant peas in the fall. I've always wanted to see what fall peas would produce like, because what stresses the peas is when they are setting their fruit and the days are over 80 degrees. So I'm hoping that when I plant them in the fall, we can get them to the spot where they're producing their fruit in cooler weather, and who knows, maybe I'll get a much bigger crop. But either way, I've learned a lot. And the rabbits were also eating my red beets this year, and one of the reasons that I think I've struggled more with rabbits this year than in a lot of previous years, there's actually two reasons. There's a fly that keeps biting my foot. We had a very mild winter, so there's a lot more rabbits, or I should say a lot more rabbits survived the winter. So we've got a lot more rabbit pressure. And then number two, we put in our underground electric dog fence on the north side of the garden because the dogs stopped respecting the boundaries I had set for them in the garden. And when I would leave, they would watch me leave, and then they'd go to the garden and help themselves to peas and potatoes and anything else that was ready. So we had to put the underground dog fence on that side of the garden. And I think just the lack of dog presence in my garden has left a lot of room for rabbits to come into my garden. And I know somebody's going to ask, what about deer? The deer here are very, very wild. It's very vast here. So they're not used to people at all. Like, if there's a deer out in the hayfield, all I need to do is make some noise up there on the patio and they are gone. So the deer we seldom see them in our yard. We seldom see them in our pasture. They stay far away here. So these 2 rows and this row, so the first row and the last 2 rows are like whole peas, the kind that you shell. And then these are snap peas, the kind that you eat the shell and everything. So yes, my peas are finally growing, and I think it's because a combination of things. I do think the pie plates kept sparrows away. I do think sparrows were one of the culprits. And number 2, a friend of mine, Michelle, over at Solely Rested, she told me about mint. So I harvested some mint and laid it along each row. And so I'm not sure which varmint I was, battling, or maybe I was battling both sparrows and rabbits. But whatever it was, it has moved on to another area. So next, we've got all our corn and weeds. And this is actually my project for today, is to weed this corn, because we've got more rain forecasted for tonight, and always want to tackle any weeds. If they're big enough for you to see them, like you've just seen in my corn, you want to focus on tackling those weeds. If you guys stay out of the garden for 2 and 3 days, your weeds are going to be 2 and 3 times as high as they were before the rain, and not nearly as easy to get rid of. So next, we've got my green beans, and we've got some little ones, and then we've also got some bigger ones down here. And the reason for that is I planted my green beans. After I planted them, we had like a week's worth of rain, and I think I may have planted them too deep, because some of them, they seem to rot off right at the ground. So the smaller ones are where I replanted my green beans to make sure that we get a full crop, because I need at least 100 quarts of green beans, if not more, in our cold room for the winter. But green beans are also a fairly short season, so that's another crop that I'll get a second chance at if I don't feel like this planting gives me enough. And then next, over here, you can see is my tomatoes. I'm very happy with how my tomatoes are looking. The tomatoes are looking great. It's time to get some compost on them, get some fence on them, take those bottom leaves off. June just is a very, very busy month in the garden. But I have 25 tomato plants, and I have a variety of some heirloom slicing tomatoes. And then mostly I have the Amish paste tomatoes, or the Roma tomatoes, because those they really make a nice thick sauce, and they're so easy to clean and just slice and put in the pot to cook them. So Amish paste tomatoes are over half of what I've got, and then I've got some delicious, and I think I also have some Better Boy. I don't exactly remember which kind I planted, but I think I have 25 plants, and that should get me over 100 quarts of tomato products like pasta sauce, tomato juice, tomato soup, chili base, salsa, all of those things. So last year I had my peas here. I always like to follow the peas with tomatoes, because peas pull nitrogen up into the soil. So I always like to put my tomatoes where my peas were last year. And I've got some more volunteer sunflowers over there. And then here I've got all my peppers. They too are where the peas were last year. I've got green peppers, and then all the way down here I have some hot peppers that I just planted. And then here is my sweet potatoes. These need to get compost put on them as well. So they are adjusting to being in the soil, and they are doing quite well. I've not seen any wilting happening. Over here, I planted some more sweet onions. Not sure why I planted more sweet onions. I guess I didn't think I had enough, or maybe I had 2 packages and they didn't all fit over in the other garden. And here we've got carrots. What I need to do with those is thin them down. I need to thin those and make a nice row so that each carrot has more space and can grow bigger. So when I thin them, I'll leave that one. I'll just leave enough. See, there's a couple there. Oh, there's a little carrot on there already. I want about an inch between each carrot, and you don't want to take the strong, healthy ones. You want to take the weaker ones. So that's kind of what I want to see. That's how I'll thin these down to be kind of spaced like these. So that's what I need to do with the carrots. And then down here is my poor red beets. Something was nibbling at these too. And I know that it was a rabbit because I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the rabbit nibbling at the red beets. So what I started doing is anytime I came and harvested some onions, I laid the onion tops down by the red beets. And what I was thinking is the rabbit's going to be like, oh, she planted onions here, and move on. And actually, you can see the very first onion tops I laid down were here. And he kept nibbling at the rest of the row. And also, he came from the cow pasture, so he came from that direction, so he'd start nibbling here too. Now, I will replant the rest of this row. I mean, some of them are coming back. You can tell that he hasn't been here this week. And I also put some mint down here. So I'm definitely going to replant some red beets here in the rest of this row. I just haven't gone to get any seeds yet. So red beets are another short season crop, so I still have plenty of time to plant those and get another crop, get a full crop of red beets. So here against my arches, I have some cucumbers. There I've got a little Thunbergia plant, which is just for pretty. It's just a flower. Cucumbers on both sides of these arches here. Those already have some grass clippings for mulch. And then down here, I think this is a little pumpkin plant, but it was a volunteer and I transplanted it here. And I've got squash along both sides of these arches and some scarlet runner beans. And here I left this little patch here because I've got volunteer tomatoes coming up. And these are the little yellow sun globe or something. I'm not even sure the name, but they're tiny little yellow tomatoes and they are delicious. So we're gonna walk up here and take a quick look at my berry garden. And I call it my berry garden because I'm planning to move raspberries up here too, but so far we have strawberries and blueberries up here. And this garden's kind of a work in process. So this, I want to fill this up with ever-bearing strawberries so that we have strawberries, a little bit of strawberries all summer long for our ice cream. But this bed is full of strawberries, and you can tell they're just starting to ripen. We really need a bunch of sunshine for a few days, because these strawberries are really soft. Looks like the robins have been eating that one. And then here, these two beds are my blueberry bushes that we planted last summer. And they are looking wonderful. Looks like there's some weeding to do out here too. Here's my brassica garden, and here again, something nibbled off some of them, and they're just not doing super. My brassicas, normally I plant them in the big garden, and this is where my next batch of blueberries will go, in these two beds. But this spring I'm like, oh well, we probably won't plant the blueberries until summer, and in the meantime I can use this bed for brassicas. And I'm not a big fan of wood chips because it's so hard for the soil to break down the wood chips, and any soil that is against the wood chips is going to be busy composting the wood chips. And when I say busy, I mean the nutrients in that soil are going to be tied up digesting the wood chips. So this soil is busy. I should have fertilized these brassicas, but I'm not real happy with them. The cabbage mostly is what I want for preserving. My family's not a huge fan of broccoli and cauliflower, so I'll just plant some fall broccoli and cauliflower and we'll have it then. Yeah, I'm not very pleased with how my cabbage is doing, but mostly what happens is it has to get its roots down past the wood chip soil. And yes, I did plant them down into the soil. And also it's a first year garden here, so maybe I just needed to fertilize it. Maybe in my big garden, I've been so intentional about making sure that every area gets some compost every year, and maybe the soil just wasn't that built up. And then I used this other future blueberry bed for herbs, and it's the same. My herbs have been planted a couple weeks ago, and they're really just sitting there. They're not happy. There's something going on, definitely. There's my basil, it's just sitting there. So I know it's not a water issue because we've had plenty of rain. I think it's just my soil. It's new soil, and I'm just not a fan of wood chip gardens. And I know many people love wood chip gardens, but here in our area, I have yet to meet somebody that loves wood chip gardens. And I think climate plays a role, and your soil type. I do not think that our soil loves wood chips like other types of soil does. So here's my cold frame. My rhubarb is over there. I've got some lettuce that we're harvesting. I seeded some onions in there. And of course there's weeds in there too. Here's some cilantro that I seeded last fall from my cilantro that went to seed. I've got some, I want to say it's yarrow coming there. And then here's my spinach and radish and lettuce garden. Radishes have gone to seed, or they're blooming. And then we'll eat the seed pods. There's some cut lettuce. All my spinach has gone to seed. I need to pull that out and give it to the chickens. Here's some beautiful cut lettuce. And then the head lettuce that we're harvesting and eating lots of salads from. And here's how I cut my head lettuce. I'll just cut it out, and then you can see this one's already growing again. So as long as the weather stays nice and cool like this, we'll keep harvesting lettuce. Now, this variety is Saratoga variety, and I find it to be very, very heat tolerant. This is Butter Crunch, and although it's not as heat tolerant, it is delicious. And here you can see I've cut that one, and it's got babies coming up. And then what I'll do is I'll transplant. I'll take some of these little lettuce seedlings. I'll transplant them into this area and let them form nice big heads. So this area up here is what we're preparing, where we're preparing to move our black and red raspberries to. I'm tired of battling them on each end of the main garden. So we're going to move them up here. And we've got our grapes up here. And this, we transplanted these grapes. They were growing down in the main garden. So we've just transplanted them up here. So we're just beginning with their pruning and training them to grow up there. So I did quite a bit of pruning and training them this year. But next spring I'll do even more, because all of these fruit-bearing vines, I want them to be along the top like that. So that's kind of a work in progress, and I'm kind of learning as I go with these. And then at the bottom of the grapes I have transplanted some comfrey and some milkweed, some pollinating plants. I've got some more comfrey up there. And here I put some yarrow at the bottom of this one, some more yarrow and comfrey here. And my tools are still out here from working with this landscape fabric. Okay, let's talk about two of my very favorite tools. I think each garden video I'm going to share some of my favorite garden tools, but because I don't have time to share all of them. But today I'm going to share my two favorite hoes. And other than a regular garden hoe, which I rarely use anymore, these two are my very favorite, and I'm going to show you why. So this one has a sharp edge here and here, and this is called a stirrup hoe. And I don't exactly know what this one is called, but I call it my Japanese hoe. And this one has a short handle, and I'm going to put both of these into action for you. Okay, I'm going to show you how this little Japanese weeding tool works. Let's say I want to weed here by my corn, and this is how I'll weed most of my corn today, is with this sharp little tool. That's how easy it is. Now, when you order your tool, when you get yours will have a really pointy tip. Mine, we've broken off the tip. I think one of my sons was using it in an inappropriate way for something other than weeds. Anyway, there we go. That is my favorite little Japanese weeding tool. So now this one is very much the same, serves the same purpose. I just mostly use this one when I want to weed some large areas like this. And it weeds both ways. It weeds when you're pulling back or pushing. All right, guys, thank you for walking to the garden with me this morning. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. I do read most of the comments, and if I don't, my husband does. And I will try to answer as many questions as I can in the next garden tour. Hopefully that will be in a couple weeks, because in June, when the sun comes up at say like 4:30, 5 o'clock and doesn't go down until 10 p.m. We collect a lot of heat degree days or heat units, and that makes things grow in leaps and bounds. So in June, I'll probably be doing quite a few garden videos. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.